Hello and welcome back. I know you're all experiencing a lot of deja vu from watching this, asking yourselves why am I preparing the seeds from yet another papaya to plant. Well, I bought this red Caribbean papaya, and this day lags behind the start of the Maradol papaya timeline by 68 days. So I bought this one, and 3 days later it rotted so badly that I was thinking about just using it for seeds. So I don't even need to use the knife. It's all fermented. There's an alcohol smell from the fermentation. And this thing is just full of seeds. Of course, I won't even need that many. And I'm going to use the same process of rubbing with a paper towel for 2 rounds to get rid of all that pulp. And after that, I can treat them a little bit and plant them. So this was a backup that happened starting 68 days after the original timeline. As you saw in the beginning, this day is on September 13th, 2020. It's one of the hottest months in San Diego. I think I had the bag with this papaya just sort of folded and closed for 3 days, and this happened. So the seeds are very clean now. There's no wetness behind. And with a little bit of processing, I'll just go ahead and plant them in the same kind of sand soil mixture. Well, at this point, it's basically almost all pure sand. I'm sure there's a little bit of that California hill dirt, clay soil mixed in that I filtered a long time ago. It's basically in all of my pots in tiny amounts, but I don't want to throw away large quantities of sand that's perfectly good for growing things. So I turned on the faucet, kind of rinsed here. Be sure you don't just blast it, otherwise you're just going to wash all these seeds you took all this time to clean down the drain. And this isn't stuff that you can get rid of from the drain. So I'm going to follow that tried and true principle that a lot of people follow, which is to get rid of the floaters. Now, I don't know if this is an old wives' tale or, if it's true or not, but yeah, maybe there is some good scientific basis behind that. There's just sort of a lack of mass inside these seed husks that all the seeds that have sunk to the bottom have. So maybe it's not a bad idea. In any case, that's what I've chosen to go with. I'm not going to do an experiment in which I try to plant those floaters in one region of the pot. I'm just going to go with these that sink to the bottom. I'm going to give it another rinse and pour off the supername, and then basically just get to the planting. So the reason I'm doing this is as a backup for the Maradol papaya series, and since I wasn't going to eat that papaya, the red Caribbean papaya, I was just going to go with this. So both of them were grown in Mexico, and yeah, I mean, there shouldn't be that big of a difference, I'm thinking, between the two cultivars. And I think the way I ended up planting this was basically, I just had one in the center. As you can see, there's kind of a hole that's been filled up. And I planted the rest sort of around in this sort of a U-shaped fashion. And I'm still going to go with this hydrogen peroxide, and this is 3% hydrogen peroxide. So you've seen this before in many of my series. Apologies if this beginning of this episode is a little bit redundant, seemingly, and sort of boring. But yeah, I like to document what I'm doing. But as you can guess from the length of this episode, it's only 15 minutes, so I don't cover everything in the gory details. So I'm just going to seal this up with plastic wrap and keep it indoors with a catch tray for any runoff, like I've done with my recent series in 2020. And what this does is it preserves 100% moisture at the top so the sand doesn't dry out. And on day 11, you can see that there's been germination in many instances, but since I kept the seeds at the top for visibility, it's sort of a mess. And this is what happens when you have seeds germinating in unnatural conditions, like above the soil. The roots just kind of look all misshapen and go all over the place and try to do these U-turns to get down into the soil, such as that one has a finer root coming out. and I'm going to expedite this entire process and make sure these succeed. But you can see just now that the seed inside basically busted out of its coat. So I'm going to do this sort of like a haphazard fashion, because I really expect the one seed in the middle to succeed, and hence I don't need everything to be perfectly ordered. I expect to be pulling out most of these at some point if the pot gets really crowded. And if not, at least I'll have a bunch of seedlings, or hopefully a bunch of seedlings that have germinated not too close to the corners of this pot, but in positions that are relatively favorable, so that in the worst case scenario, or second to worst case scenario, if just one of these germinates and does well and survives, at least I won't have to do a transplant immediately. I could just let one of these seedlings grow, even if it's closer to one of the edges. So I'm going to cover it all up, pat it down, and spray it like this. And on day 15, you can see there's germination yet again. So this is the first seedling that sort of made this little loop as its shoot system tries to break out of the sand. And I'm going to use some more distilled water. You can see there's runoff at the bottom for the planter tray. And that's just something that happens on its own. It takes water quite a while to work its way through the pot and sort of seep out through those holes I drilled in the bottom. So this is day 16, this is day 19, and yeah, I'm going to spray some hydrogen peroxide to prevent damping off. Damping off is a process by which you'll notice that a lot of these seedlings for various species just kind of keel over. And on day 20, I decided to take this outside. And bear in mind, this was just a backup pot, so this isn't really my standard operating procedure. You can see one of the seedlings sort of fell over. And I had this leftover initial batch of myclobutanol fungicide in a spray bottle, so I decided to give it a little spray just to see if I can prevent some damping off. But by day 34, you can see that that didn't work out too well. This hasn't adapted to the change in environment where I took it outside, so that means the nighttime temperatures are cold, because in this Mediterranean climate, it's sort of deserty. The daytimes are hot and the nighttimes are cold. And this balcony gets a lot of sun from late morning to early afternoon. And then it's a partial sun. It's never getting full sun on this balcony. So I flood water this thing. And you know, I really didn't expect this thing to even survive or matter, because I have my main series, which I'll show you. So this is the Maradol papaya timeline, the original one, day 187. The backup seedling seems stunted in growth. It is beautiful still. The foliage looks great, but it hasn't really done anything besides grow up to about the lip of this dual stack trash can that's serving as a planter of mine. Actually, this isn't one of the dual stacked ones, and it doesn't have holes drilled at the bottom. This is the backup pot, so this thing doesn't have any drainage, but the seedlings seem to have done fine. These other things are the jackfruit seedlings. But before day 187, it's hard to know exactly when the main seedling perished, and I think part of that had to do with a giant tap water flush I did. So I'm thinking, is this a damping off a fungal infection, or is it a blight of some kind that struck several of my plant species, such as the papaya here, and avocado, pomegranate, and jackfruit. So it seems like everything on the west of this balcony, the right side, when I open up the sliding door, just succumbed suddenly to some sort of leaf blight. And it's not that the other plants died, it's just that a lot of their leaves died. So it's day 112 for this red Caribbean papaya timeline, and as you can see, there's a lot of seedlings and they're doing pretty well. I just left the seed husks in there, and there's a weed growing in the center, which I can pull out and just leave on top as fertilizer, since there's already organic material just sitting on the top that I haven't bothered to clean. Maybe I'll just get rid of it all at some point. But these seedlings are doing pretty well. For most of the winter of 2020, I just didn't really do much. So this is the first fertilization I've done for this series. It's day 119, and it's actually the only fertilization I've done for this entire episode. You can see all of those seed coats kind of floating around in there. If I were to water more, they would just pour over the edge. So yeah, I still haven't gotten rid of those, and we have a lot of seedlings that are looking very healthy. This is by day 148. I'm using a headlamp. It's an LED headlamp for outdoor use, and I was just seeing if I could do some good filming with this, since we're fast approaching the time in which this balcony will start to no longer receive any direct sun throughout the day. So at this point, yeah, it's already February 2021, and these things are looking pretty good. There's two that are, they're first and second movers, I wouldn't say, but they're the biggest ones, and the rest aren't doing too shabby either. There will be a little bit of crowding going on, and this is the Maradol Papaya timeline. It's already day 216 for that one, so that's 68 days ahead again. And this one hasn't really done anything at all, so yeah, there's really not much to comment on for this one. So I was thinking that maybe just not doing that much watering has really been great for the other pot. Granted, I've used tap water, so that's not really a factor versus distilled water. And as you can see, this is day 168. It's looking pretty good. It's looking like a little mini forest, and I think it's more exciting actually when there's a lot of seedlings in here. So they will crowd each other, but that all depends. If these two front runners get really big and tall, I'm expecting the others to stay really stunted and not really do anything, just sort of be in a biological stasis. And that could be fine too. So I'm using a backpack sprayer to just sort of water these things. And I know the root structures are very healthy because there's only been like 1 or 2 instances early on for this Red Caribbean pop timeline in which like I watered and some seedlings sort of keeled over in the very beginning, but that doesn't happen anymore. So I know the root systems are very robust, and these things are mostly safe. So I don't want to do a complete, really deep watering very often, and I think just spraying some distilled water like that is great for a few weeks because there's not a lot of evaporation during the winter. So this is the Maradol Papaya timeline, day 236. So this one's lost a few leaves, and it's not too clear on why that is. Granted, they could just do this over the winter, but that didn't happen with any of my new seedlings in the Red Caribbean pot. And as you can see, the jackfruit seedlings aren't doing too hot at this point. Some of the leaves are falling off or dying. So the main pot is fine. For the jackfruit, that sort of proves that the fertilization is doing something. The sprinkles of Miracle Grow plus 1 a day multivitamin crushed into powder form. So I'm going to move again soon from this place, and this pot of backup seedlings will be ended, and there's really no loss here because this thing doesn't really grow, whereas all of those Red Caribbean seedlings are just growing taller and taller without me really even doing anything. So this pot is growing great. And the series has taken a major turn, and that's why I've shown you all of that deja vu in the beginning. So this is day 201 for the Red Caribbean timeline, and the leaves are overlapping. The 2 biggest seedlings are just getting bigger and bigger, and the other ones aren't doing too shabby as well. So I've watered very sparingly this year in 2021 to avoid any kind of root rot. And I think that's worked really well. I know there's a little bit of anxiety created when you see the top is all dry like that for weeks on end, but it's worked really well, unless the weather gets really, really hot and the air temperature is consistently in the 80s or even beyond that in Fahrenheit. I don't see any reason to water that much more. So I think less micromanagement is better. Maybe this is the future of the nature of how I grow my plants. Just sow a whole bunch of seeds into one pot and let nature take its course. These things have done really well throughout winter. So in conclusion, I think less is more. Maybe there's a lot to be said for the conventional wisdom and way of handling things. So I'm going to move soon, and once I get set up, I'll be producing some new content. But in the meantime, thanks for watching, and please stay tuned for further updates.